When I was 15 years old, a movie called Iron Man was released. I never saw this movie in theaters. My first time watching Iron Man actually came after I bought, not rented, but bought, the DVD. I thought it was decent. Little did I know that this movie would be the first in what would become my favorite film franchise of all time. Hello, and welcome to the first video in a series of videos in which I will be ranking the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, from here on out, I'm just going to call it the MCU, from my favorite to least favorite. I want to put it out there that I do not think there is a bad MCU movie. I just think some are better than others. Some have visible flaws, some I just don't like as much as others. As I share my opinions on each film, I will do my best to talk about both the negatives as well as the positives. I also wanted to post a light spoiler warning for anyone watching these videos. Some of these movies are kind of difficult to talk about without delving into some of the key plot points. Now, there are 23 MCU films, and for the first video, I will be ranking movies number 23 through 21. Every other video after that will cover the next 5 films on my list. If anyone is actually watching these videos, I'd love to hear your thoughts on my rankings, so leave some comments down below on the videos. With that being said, let's go ahead and start the rankings. Coming in at number 23, my least favorite MCU movie is The Incredible Hulk. In my opinion, this movie is barely an MCU movie. The role of Bruce Banner was recast after this film, and the only part of this movie that really carries on across the entirety of the MCU is the character of General Ross. Even when Marvel was marketing for Avengers Endgame, clips that they used that were trying to showcase the character of the Incredible Hulk were actually taken from other MCU movies that the Hulk had appeared in. Now, this movie is not a bad movie. It's competently made, and the final battle sequence between the Hulk and Abomination is pretty cool. But overall, this is not really an MCU movie that I've ever felt the urge to rewatch after I watched it the first time, which is why it ends up at the bottom of my list. Now, the ranking of this next movie is going to ruffle some feathers. Coming in at number 22, I have Black Panther. For me, there are certain moments in this film, particularly near the end, where the special effects are just distractingly bad, like worse than movies that came out 10 to 15 years ago. And I usually don't let things like that bother me. But it really did in this movie. In most MCU movies, all of which heavily feature CGI, you barely notice the special effects. But you do in this movie, and every time I watch it, I notice it. As I said in the intro to this video, I don't dislike this movie. I don't dislike any MCU movie. I think T'Challa's story arc is one of the most compelling in the entire MCU. In this movie, we have a character who has to first cope with the death of his father, while also replacing his father as the king of Wakanda, and grappling internally with what kind of leader he wants to become. And when you combine that with persistent challenges both from within and without to his authority, you have a very gripping narrative in this film. I also want to acknowledge the cultural significance of this film. The main themes of this film reflect and speak to racial issues that were and continue to be prevalent throughout the world and society. And even if these themes are sometimes made very obvious throughout the film, having them in a Marvel movie gets a wider audience thinking about them and talking about them. But again, there are certain things that I expect from a visual standpoint when it comes to movies in the MCU. And the fact that this movie not only did not meet those expectations, but allowed the CGI to distract me from the main story, this movie lands at number 22 on my list. At number 21, the last movie for this video is Ant-Man and the Wasp. As I was watching this movie last time, which was a couple months ago, it felt like there weren't really any stakes. When you compare the central conflict in this film with that of Infinity War, which came out just a few months before this movie becomes somewhat like a little bit uncompelling. Throughout this movie, I found myself thinking, why do I care about the problems in this movie? I just watched Thanos snap away half the universe in the previous movie. And so this movie earns its place on my list because it feels so small scale compared to what came before it. Now, there is a lot to enjoy about this movie. We got to talk about positives. Paul Rudd crushes it, per usual. He's great as Ant-Man. Evangeline Lilly as the Wasp is great as a co-lead in this movie. This movie is funny throughout, as most MCU movies are. But again, the size of the conflict in this movie, the scale of the problem that we're dealing with in this movie, when you compare that to the major conflict of Thanos that has been developing throughout the MCU, this movie lands at number 21 on my list. So there it is, my 3 least favorite MCU movies. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I know someone watching this video has something to say about where I have Black Panther ranked on my list, so let me know in the comments down below. We can have a conversation. In the next video, I'll be talking about movies number 20 through 16 in my MCU movie rankings list, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.